My name is Dr. Noah Patel, emergency medicine resident, and tonight, the clocks lied to me. I was the guy who wrote everything down, who counted the beeps and the breaths and the sips of cold coffee. I wanted the attending line on my badge so badly I could taste the laminate, and I wanted to deserve it. Those two wants never sat well together. Under Dr. Whitaker's stare, they felt like a blade's two edges. The ER hummed like it always did. A neon aquarium where everyone moved too fast to be seen. Fluorescent lights buzzed, monitors nagged, the air stank of antiseptic cut with burnt coffee, and the storm off the lake slammed rain at the windows, hard enough to turn the city into a smear of red tail lights and blue sirens. Somewhere outside, the blue line screamed past, metal on metal, as if it was mad at the tracks. My hands were shaking, and no one could see it under the gloves. It was just another West Side night. It was not. Whitaker's voice rode my shoulder anyway. Don't get cute, Patel. Patterns, not poetry. Don't waste time. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. I felt the shape of his disapproval, like a bruise I kept poking. At 0:12, my notes say 0:12, even if the wall clock said 0:09, a pregnant woman came in clutching her abdomen. Maria, sweat in her hairline, breath held like someone trying not to scream in church. Triage slapped 30 weeks on the board. Probably Braxton Hicks, someone muttered, already moving on. My stomach crawled. I took her hand and felt damp skin. Tell me where. She pointed low, then higher, then nowhere at all. The fetal heart monitor chirped a steady 150. Reassuring on paper. The pulse ox loved her, 100% like a gold star, but her pulse crept, 98, 106, 114. Her blood pressure eased down as if it was tired, 112/70 to 96/58 to 94/58. She said, I feel like something's tearing. I wrote that down. People don't say tearing for gas. At 0:21, my note shows OB paged. The pager log later said 0:24. The nurse, Elena, charted MD aware of hypotension. Patient pale, tremulous, refuses bathroom, which helped me and made it worse. Why did she refuse? If she was that unstable, why did we wait for a urine sample? The lab spat out a hematocrit that looked fine at 0:27. Good news. Except the monitor beside her was now whispering 88/54, and her fingers were ice. Her lactate came back 3.1, then hemolyzed, redraw. The fetal tracing dipped to 120 for a breath, then rebounded so pretty it felt like a lie. I ordered fluids because that's the book. Whitaker in my head. Do not drown a bleed, Patel. I heard him and hung the bag anyway. I didn't ignore her. I wrote as I worked, my left hand listening to her pulse, my right scribbling. Diaphoretic, guarding, pain 910, says wrong inside. I remember that sentence like a song I hated. The OB resident texted me en route at 0:33, but the transport order printed at 0:31. That's not how en route works. The printer was wrong, or I was. By 0:41, the storm was rattling the windows, like they were teeth. Elena squeezed my shoulder and whispered, You were right to call early. In her note, MD suggested abruption, continued monitoring. Helpful, also damning. If I suspected a bleed, why was she still in my bay? Because the protocol said upstairs gets the strip. And upstairs said send her when stable. And stable is a word that turns to smoke when you try to hold it. Time slipped. The EKG strip, stamped 0:28, lay under a monitor that insisted it was 0:32. The overhead clock lagged. My watch had fogged up. I ran between her bed and the chart like I could outrun whatever was happening inside her. There was a memory I kept not looking at. My father on a kitchen floor. The towel not holding. The way sound narrows when you know the bleeding is inside. I pushed it away. I wrote more. Writing was how I kept the room from sliding. Later, they said I treated her pain like it was routine. That I missed it. They were loud. Their certainty was the loudest thing. My notes were quiet. They had the right words and the wrong safety. I stayed behind when the bay emptied and the janitor mopped the rain we tracked in. I flipped back through the chart and hit an edge where paper should have been. A page was gone, cleanly torn. The copy in the system had it, though. A line in my handwriting. My square letters. My little slashes through the sevens. I never stopped doing since chemistry lab. Reassured PT. Likely ligament pain. Discharge if comfortable. Timestamped 019. I didn't remember writing it. At 019, I was staring at her pulse jumping under my fingers. At 019, I was hearing Whitaker tell me not to chase zebras, while everything in me screamed hoofbeats weren't the problem. The discharge line sat there, neat and calm, and the fetal tracing from 023 showed a dip that would have made me stay. My signature looked like mine. My coffee ring looked like mine. So which one lied? My notes, the clock, or me? I'm Sarah Mitchell, 36, a night shift nurse in the geriatric ward. It's always cold in the hospital, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you long for a warm home. The constant hum of fluorescent lights buzzes overhead, and the smell of antiseptic burns my nose. It's familiar, though, like a second skin. I hear the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the shuffle of worn shoes against linoleum, and the whispers of tired doctors and nurses discussing their latest patients. On nights like this, the world outside feels far away, as if it has no bearing on the lives we tend to inside these sterile walls. My life revolves around this place, which has become both my sanctuary and my prison. I live alone in a cramped apartment, filled with the clutter of textbooks, scrubs, and memories of a life I left behind in my hometown. Family dinners are a rare occasion. Sometimes I wonder if my parents have forgotten what I look like. Then there are the kids I used to babysit, now growing taller without me as part of their lives. It's ironic to see them flourish while I sacrifice time and moments that I can't get back. Missed birthdays, family gatherings, weddings, the kind of things that should fill your heart, but instead leave an empty pit in your stomach. T. Crossed off work shifts fill my calendar, and while I cherish my patients, something is always missing. I often think about that quote, "Not all heroes wear capes." But who am I kidding? I sometimes feel like I'm just wearing a uniform that holds more weight than I can handle. And tonight, I can feel a shift in the air, a subtle tension crawling up my spine. Nurse Amy shot me a concerned look while passing by, half a warning, half a plea. They say this job is like a stage, and the performers are always in danger of losing their footing. One of the doctors has been careless with his medication orders, changing dosages that could leave patients in danger, and it's caused the staff to murmur uneasily. Just last week, we had a family member in here shouting at a nurse, accusing us of neglect. It's the chaos of the ER spilling over into our place of respite, and no matter how hard I try to push it away, I feel it creeping in. Yet, through it all, my patients aren't just numbers on a face. I tell myself that a simple smile, a soft touch, can make a world of difference. I know their histories. Marie, who tells me about her husband while we share a cup of tea. Mr. Thompson, who loves to tell jokes at the worst moments, but is fighting a battle with dementia. Or Lucy, who just wants someone to hold her hand so she feels less alone. I carry their stories with me like pieces of a puzzle, and each night I hope to put them together into something beautiful, something human. But as I adjust the collar of my scrubs and ready myself for what's to come, I can't shake the feeling that something bad is looming just beyond the horizon, ready to splinter the fragile connections we've formed. The night is darkening, and deep down, I wonder if it's just another long shift, or if tonight would bring something unexpected that might change everything. The night settled like a shroud, and I was beginning to dread the shift ahead of me. as I clipped my pen to my scrubs and adjusted the... An older patient came in, Mrs. Cohen, a frail woman in her 80s who had been with us more times than I could count. Tonight, she was shivering under a thin hospital blanket, her eyes clouded but still alert. I often found her endearing. She would hold my hand as if it was a lifeline, whispering stories of her late husband and the garden he used to tend. I could see she needed help. The monitor was bleeping an urgent rhythm, and I stepped closer to adjust her IV line. Before I could even register the gravity of the situation, Dr. Harris stormed in, the scent of his cologne cutting through the antiseptic air like a knife. He glanced at Mrs. Cohen's chart and sneered. "Come on, Mitchell, get your act together. This isn't a tea party. We need orders for fluids now." His tone was sharp, slicing through my composure like glass. I felt my cheeks warm, but I kept my voice steady. "She's hypotensive, Dr. Harris. Her blood pressure's low. I'm assessing her now." But my words only seemed to make him more impatient. He waved me aside like I was an annoying fly. "And what exactly are you assessing? The art of flower arranging? Let's go." His condescension left a bitter taste in my mouth. It was just one more cruel reminder of how little he cared for the patients, how easily he dismissed them as numbers on a chart rather than people. Little did I know that this attitude would put me against the entire hospital. I could sense the murmurs from the other staff, the way their eyes flicked between us, gauging the escalating conflict. It felt as if the air was charged, each second stretching longer until it snapped. I focused on Mrs. Cohen, her skin pale and clammy under my fingers. "Mrs. Cohen, can you hear me?" I asked gently, squeezing her hand, hoping my presence could anchor her in the storm. She nodded, but I noticed the tiny tremors that betrayed her fear. "Don't worry. We're going to take care of you," I assured her, even as I could feel the leash tightening around my neck, the weight of Dr. Harris's authoritative glare pressing down like a lead blanket. The chaotic atmosphere shifted, suddenly thick with tension. Just as I felt the first stirrings of indignation brewing, a family member charged into the room, a middle-aged man with wild eyes and a desperate look on his face. "What the hell is going on here? Why isn't she hooked up to fluids yet?" His voice was a loathsome amalgam of panic and anger, and it sent an uncomfortable shiver down my spine. If you've ever felt unjustly accused, you know exactly how I felt. I turned slowly to face him, but there was no backing down. I could feel my heart racing in response to his accusation. "We are assessing her condition, sir. Please let us do our job." My voice rang out, strong, though inside I felt a quiver of fear. I hated confrontation, but I would not let him bully me. He wasn't satisfied. "Assessing? It looks like you're just wasting time. My mother is in pain, and you're acting like this is all just a game." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Dr. Harris's lips curl into a disdainful smile. The entire room bathed in a simmering heat, poised on the edge of a boiling point. In that moment, I could feel my calm fading. Everything was about to spiral out of control. In the swirling chaos, something shifted within me. I would not let this man tear down the work I had dedicated my life to. I would not let anyone strip away my dignity. "Sir, your mother needs care, not accusations," I declared firmly, my pen dancing over the medical chart as I detailed her symptoms and vital signs. "I'm now going to order fluids and conduct a rapid assessment. If everyone could step back, we can help her." I felt powerful. Maybe it was the adrenaline or just the sheer stubbornness bubbling up within me, but I wouldn't break. My colleagues were watching intently, and I sensed an unspoken solidarity behind their pressed lips and tense shoulders. And it was in that silence that everything began to collapse. I took a moment to gather myself as the family member's anger retreated, only to be replaced by confusion. I hoped it would settle into understanding. But the moment didn't last long. I could feel the atmosphere thickening again, the storm not far from brewing once more. "Where did you put that order?" Dr. Harris barked out as my fingers hovered over the keyboard. Haven't you learned that speed is crucial in situations like this? His words were a slap, hitting with the force of an insult delivered in front of my colleagues. I controlled the urge to shout back, even as my heart raced. You don't know what goes on here. You don't know what we see. But I held my breath, writing down Mrs. Cohen's vital signs as my fingers trembled over the keyboard. Slow, steady, and deliberate. In that instant, destiny was already decided. And I still didn't know. The commotion settled like a storm cloud overhead, but I felt the weight of it pushing down on my chest, constricting my breath. I could almost hear the echoes of doubt whispering through the sterile halls. Today was supposed to be just another night shift, but the air buzzed with a tension I couldn't shake. I focused on Mrs. Cohen, her frail fingers gripping mine with a desperation that spoke volumes. I took a moment to breathe before setting to work, but I felt exposed, naked under Dr. Harris's intensified scrutiny. As I typed, I could feel the sense of judgment radiating off him, every click of my keyboard almost mocking. I'd pressed the orders for fluids out of sheer instinct. Couldn't he see that? You should have done this sooner, he snapped again as I finished entering her orders, and everyone in the room fell silent, their eyes darting towards the escalating scene. I felt myself shrink beneath the weight of their unvoiced anticipation. The laughter from the hallway felt distant, almost mocking in the face of the storm brewing behind these walls. But just as I thought we'd reach some level of resolution, another hiccup emerged. Wait, her IV hasn't even reached its destination. Dr. Harris gestured dismissively, looking at me like I was some incompetent newbie who couldn't handle the pressure. In that moment, all my efforts felt inadequate, like watching my work crumble in front of every glaring eye in the room. The weight of the stairs, heavy and judgmental, bore down on me, rolling into a knot in my stomach. Ignoring his condescension, I continued swapping out the IV bag, my fingers fumbling. Normally, I had steady hands, but tonight they felt like they belonged to someone else. The saline dripped almost mockingly slow, and I couldn't shake the feeling that every second counted, but the threat of failure loomed larger now. The room felt stifling, each breath an invitation for doubt. Suddenly, Mrs. Cohen began to tremble more visibly, her breath hitching under the weight of whatever lurked beneath her fragile skin. "I don't feel well," she murmured, and my heart dropped, caught in a panic. "Just hold on, please," I whispered, squeezing her hand tighter. It felt like a lifeline we both clung to, though I wasn't certain if it would help either of us. But then the chaos erupted again as a loud voice echoed through the space. "Why is no one talking about her blood pressure? My mother is still in danger." It was Mrs. Cohen's son again, anger pouring like venom. I turned to see him, eyes wide and shaky, stepping closer. "You're all just standing around. Get some more fluids in her," he shouted, and I felt every eye weighing down on me like a heavy blanket. The anger in his voice pierced through the air, creeping into the hearts of my colleagues, and I braced myself. I could feel every pulse of judgment coursing through the room. "Calm down, sir," I implored, feeling tears pool in my eyes. "We're doing everything we can." But it felt like my words were falling into an abyss, disappearing without a trace. I could see Dr. Harris rolling his eyes. I could feel the whispers swirling. And then, just when I thought I might recover some semblance of dignity, he turned towards me with a cold glare. "What's your name again? Nurse Mitchell, is it? I seem to recall that being mentioned today." "Well, Nurse Mitchell has obviously failed to provide adequate care. Isn't that right, folks?" he barked, flipping the tension back on me like a mirror reflecting my failures. My cheeks burned and I clenched my fists to quell the tremor of indignation. A murmur rippled through the room, patients shifting in their beds, the air thick with sympathy that felt like 1,000 eyes judging me. The cold linoleum pressed against my back, as if the world's fairness had dissipated into wall shadows. I took a deep breath, and in that moment, everything began to feel like it was slipping out of my grasp. But I had no idea it was still going to get worse. The nurse's station loomed ahead, and as I adjusted my stained lab coat, I glanced down to see a crumpled medical record wedged beneath my elbow. I picked it up, smoothing the wrinkles with trembling fingers, suddenly feeling the weight of my worthlessness as I stared at the figures, the numbers they used to measure lives. But what did they truly mean? I shoved it back onto the counter, my heartbeat sounding. "Why can't you just see my mother as a person?" the son continued, and with every word my heart fragmented, shards of hurt echoing through me. "You all just want your paychecks. I'm trying to help her." I shot back, but I could hear the doubt lacing through my voice. The room buzzed, filled with silent stares from my colleagues, and even the patients, a palpable tension simmering in the air. I had given my all, but was it good enough? Finally, I managed to break through the frantic energy, ordering more fluids with trembling determination. I dared to glance at the other nurses, searching for some sort of acknowledgement, just a hint of solidarity. Amy caught my eye for a brief second, but then looked away, and a wave of isolation washed over me. Laughter faded, and I felt the world closing in when out of nowhere the lights flickered, a harbinger of what was to come. In the silence, as the emergency lights dimly glowed, the monitors beeped erratically. Then it hit me. The magnitude of the storm was far more than I could have foreseen. I knew deep down that this moment wasn't done unraveling. It had only just begun. And that's when I heard a voice that would change everything. The lights flickered again, and for a second, the world around me felt suspended, casting shadows on the faces of colleagues and patients alike. I focused on Mrs. Cohen, still trembling but alert, and the gnawing tension in my chest felt more pronounced. Just as I was about to lean closer to her, hoping to ease her fear, Mrs. Cohen's son stepped in front of me, blocking my view. "What the hell's going on? Why isn't she being treated right? My mother needs you people to act," he yelled, his voice carrying a weight that cut through the sterile air. The room turned silent, the kind of silence that crushes you with its weight. I felt every eye on me, my colleagues, the patients, even the hovering orderlies. It wasn't just Mrs. Cohen's life at stake. It felt like my entire career was hanging by a thread, and the tension built like a wave, threatening to crash down at any moment. "I'm doing exactly that, sir," I said, my voice steady but strained, summoning every ounce of composure I had left. "I just ordered fluids, and I'm monitoring her condition closely." But he didn't want to hear it. "Monitor her condition? She's on the brink. You're wasting time and taking orders from a clown who apparently doesn't know a patient from a mannequin." The heat rose in my cheeks and my mind raced. He didn't understand. He didn't know about the countless hours I'd put in, the lives I'd saved. It felt like a punch to the gut, belittling not just my efforts, but my entire existence in this field. "Sir, I assure you, I care about your mother's well-being," I retorted, but it was like tossing words into a chasm. No response, just silence stretching across the room like a taut wire, not letting me speak, not letting me defend myself. Dr. Harris stepped closer, crossing his arms, a smug smile on his face that made my stomach churn. "You see, Nurse Mitchell, losing your cool won't help your case. Maybe if you focused on patient care instead of arguing, we wouldn't be in this predicament." His words felt like blades, cutting deeper and deeper, added to the growing murmurs from colleagues who were supposed to support each other. I could sense the whispers creeping in, judging, gathering momentum. I looked around for some solidarity, an ally, someone who'd say, "She's right." But instead, they all stared, those familiar faces now foreign, the camaraderie shattered like glass. I took a deep breath, my heart beating wildly against my ribcage, and the words spilled out before I had time to think. "I know Mrs. Cohen's history. I've cared for her many times. She needs attention immediately But the family member wasn't done with me. And what good is your history if you can't even keep up with her basic needs? You should all be ashamed, he yelled, his voice rising, and suddenly I felt every pair of eyes on me feel heavier, their thoughts inscribed on my skin like invisible ink. Then I saw it, a chair behind me, and someone pulled it away just as I transitioned my weight. I spun around to grab it, embarrassment flooding me. My hand barely caught the edge of the seat as I stumbled slightly, but managed to catch myself. Oh God, was this how it would end? With me literally brought down by the weight of it all, a farce to add to the disaster. Have I turned into some kind of joke? I whispered to myself, the question barely forming on my lips. Would I be remembered as the nurse who stumbled? I glanced back, and the smirks on my colleagues' faces felt like hot coals. Enough, I finally shouted, the word erupting like a flare in the night, surprising even me. I won't let this man belittle the work I do. I won't sit idly while my entire career and dignity are dragged through the mud. Mrs. Cohen deserves better, and I do too. The silence was staggering, and I could see disbelief etched across their faces. But there was also something else. Some flicker of acknowledgement swept through the crowd. Was it fear? Understanding? Whatever it was, it brought out a flicker of strength within me, a strange resilience that surprised even myself. But Dr. Harris narrowed his eyes, stepping closer. My heart quickened. You want to escalate this? Fine. Tell the board how you've put her at risk. I'll backtrack everything you've done. I can strip your license faster than you can say patient care. You'll be hearing from HR. His voice was cold, a chilling confirmation of the very real threat hanging in the air. Panic clawed at my throat as I fought against the urge to back down, to cower under the mounting pressure of it all. I won't back down. I'm here to care for patients, not to be a scapegoat, I said, my voice shaky but determined. I could feel myself bordering on surrender. But as the weight of their judgment loomed over me, I grasped tightly to the thought that Mrs. Cohen needed me. Despite the raging storm around us, I needed to stand firm, an anchor against the tide threatening to pull me under. But just as I opened my mouth to speak again, to make one last plea to rally support, I sensed a shift behind me, a familiar figure stepping forward from the crowd. I didn't know what was coming next, but at that moment, I didn't realize how much the tide was about to turn. The tension in the air felt like a thick fog, wrapping around me as I faced Dr. Harris, the family member, and my colleagues. I could feel the weight of their eyes, all questioning my competence. This was supposed to be a team leader moment for me, but every second that passed tightened the grip of uncertainty in my stomach. All I could think of was Mrs. Cohen, her frail form, the way she had instinctively reached for my hand, and now I was standing here, fighting for her life and my reputation. And then, from the corner of my eye, I noticed someone shifting slightly. It was Amy, the quiet nurse who had always stood by, observing more than she engaged. She had always been the kind of person who vanished into the background, yet tonight she moved like she was about to speak up. "This isn't the time for this," she started, but her voice was quickly drowned out by the sun. It cut through the room with sharp edges, and as I glanced back at him, I could see the raw emotion etched across his face. "Your mother is in critical condition, and you're just standing there arguing?" he shouted, the vein in his temple pulsating ominously. I felt the pressure roll off him like waves crashing against the shore. I wanted to scream, to tell him we were doing everything we could, but the words felt trapped in my throat. Then Amy took a small step forward. "Mrs. Cohen has an underlying condition we may have missed in her chart," she said, her normally gentle voice now carrying a firm note of urgency. Her previous admissions were more complicated than this. Complicated how? The sun shot back, his fury eclipsing even that glimmer of hope. I turned to Amy, my heart racing. The realization hit me like a jolt. All those admissions, all those times I'd held her hand during the small talk to ease her fear. Perhaps I hadn't seen the bigger picture. How had I let something slip under my skin? A few months ago, she was treated for severe dehydration and acute renal failure. The records weren't clear on discharge, Amy continued, her voice unwavering now. There was something hope-filled in her eyes, a light piercing through the chaos. I started to remember shades of murky facts from Mrs. Cohen's history, scattered through the back of my mind. Just then, something shifted within the whirlwind, and before I could fully digest this new information, the family member exploded again. "What good is this doing? It's all just excuses, more reasons to do nothing." "Actually, no," I argued, suddenly feeling like I had a lifeline. "If we give her fluids now and monitor her kidney function closely, we could help her regain stability." I looked around, willing my colleagues to back me up, to see this wasn't just one more misstep in a long line of them. But as I spoke, I noticed Amy had pulled out a worn folder from her bag and was flipping through it. My heart dropped. I hadn't even seen her bring it in. She held it up, her expression grave. "Look, I kept a copy of her previous charts. There are details here that weren't shared with all staff. And this?" She pulled out a single paper, weathered and crumpled, the ink barely legible against the background. "This is the key." "What is it?" I asked, leaning in. "It's a note from her last visit, signed off by a different doctor," Amy said, holding the document between us as if it were sacred. "But the medications listed here don't match anything we've prescribed tonight. It's like the orders were altered, deliberately." I blinked, my heart stammering against my ribcage. "Altered?" I could feel my pulse racing, the significance dawning on me like the first rays of light piercing a cloudy horizon. Why would anyone do that? Who was behind it? Before I could catch my breath, the family member caught a glimpse of the document, his brow furrowing in concern. "What does that mean?" "It means," I hesitated, my voice faltering under the weight of this revelation, "that something isn't adding up. If these orders were changed, altered without approval, we might have been treating her incorrectly all along." Anger coursed through the room again, but this time it felt different. It was charged with energy, a desperate hope flickering against the grip of dread. "So this was never about negligence on my part," I expressed aloud, the realization lighting a fire deep within me. But then the family member stilled, a flash of confusion darting across his face. "So you're saying what exactly? That you've been set up? That it's someone else's fault?" But just as I prepared to respond, Dr. Harris snapped his gaze toward me, his passion morphing into something sharper, like a hunter homing in on wounded prey. "That's a dangerous accusation, Nurse Mitchell. You think you can throw your colleagues under the bus and hope no one will look any deeper?" The air in the room turned electric, charged with unspoken threats as Dr. Harris towered over me, the looming responsibility suddenly amalgamating into an overwhelming force. The tension swelled higher, a swelling storm preparing to descend. Yet in that moment, I had just enough clarity to realize I had a choice. I could back down, cave into the pressure exerting force on my shoulders, or I could rise, determined and fierce, protecting not only Mrs. Cohen's dignity, but also my own. But before I could answer, Amy said quietly, "There's been more than one person involved here, and whoever altered those orders might have done more harm than we can see." The sheer weight of her words settled into my bones, and I instinctively looked at the paper again. Suddenly, a memory sparked, a brief mention of a doctor from another ward whose absence had made the rounds in hushed tones. But why bring their name here? I didn't have time for distractions, not now. Then I noticed a smear of ink in the corner of the note. It shifted like a dark shadow against the light. My heart raced as I recognized a familiar scrawl. A signature that shouldn't have been there. "What the hell?" I whispered, barely loud enough for myself to hear, but the truth was already boiling within me, waiting to break free. Someone knew the truth and had just let it slip. The air crackled with tension. It felt as if the walls of the hospital were closing in on me. I stood there, still gripping the frayed edge of the document Amy had unveiled, my heart thundering in my chest. It felt surreal. The revelation of the altered orders hanging in the air like a damning sentence suspended over chaos. I watched as everyone's expressions morphed in real time. Disbelief, curiosity, and tension intertwining. A human tapestry that felt like it might unravel at any moment. Dr. Harris, his expression shifting from arrogance to uncertainty, jabbed a finger toward Amy and me. "You think you're both above reproach now. Where's your proof? Just because something is suspicious doesn't mean it's true." He spat the words, his bravado faltering just enough for me to sense that even he was rattled by the crack in his facade. "You can't throw accusations without any evidence." But I could see it in his eyes, a flicker of desperation as he teetered at the edge of accountability. "I'm responsible for this ward. You all are behaving like children. I won't have you ruin everything I've built, everything I've worked for." He straightened, shoulders rigid, trying to reclaim the authority he thought was his by right. I felt the knot tightening in my stomach, the veins in my temples throbbing with anxiety, rage, and something akin to pity. "I'm not trying to ruin anything," I said, my voice steady yet quiet, slicing through the murmur of uncertainty. "I'm trying to save her. We're trying to find the truth here. Mrs. Cohen deserves that." "Save it," he barked, his laughter hollow and cruel. "You think I care about a patient's life? This is about keeping my job. You all are just pawns in a chess game you don't even realize you're part of." The way he spat those words made it almost feel foreign, inhuman really. That was it, wasn't it? The moment I'd been waiting for. All the ugliness of the world around me rushed back into focus, reminding me that I wouldn't let this man demonize the reality of our work or the value of our lives. A weight settled on the room, the uneasy silence stretching like a taut wire, vibrating with the tension of our collective breaths. I glanced over at the family member, his expression one of heartbreak and confusion. It felt painfully raw, and I could see bewilderment as he wrestled with everything he believed in. "I just want my mother to be okay," he shouted. His voice cracked, desperation spilling into the space between us. "Believe me, we want that too," I replied, my soul aching in response to his anguish. Then came the ripple effect. Whispers spread like wildfire. The tension in the room morphed into a living, breathing entity. Colleagues who'd once silently agreed with Dr. Harris began to exchange glances, shifting uneasily as the gravity of the moment weighed on them. And I felt that shift resonate inside me. Amy stepped forward, holding the document like a shield. "You don't understand, do you?" she said, looking straight at him. "It's not just negligence. This could be malpractice, and there are lives at stake." The murmur of agreement shifted like a wave among our coworkers. I could see Bill, who always wore a relaxed smile, his face now taut with concern. Nurse Elena stood by the door, her expression hardened, an unwavering sentinel who quietly observed our chaos unravel. They'd been quiet until now, but I could sense their shifting allegiance. It felt like a dam about to burst. "Guys, this is madness," someone finally chimed in, voice trembling. "We need to act on this. We can't just sweep it under the rug." "Or lose a patient because we were too scared to speak up," another voiced. The world I'd thought so certain began to splinter, cracks forming along the edges of our collective reality. In those moments, everything seemed to gather momentum, like a rolling boulder hurtling down a steep hill. "You think you can just cover this up?" I challenged, my heart pounding. You think the truth won't eventually surface? You think we can stand by while lives hang in the balance? Stop it, Dr. Harris shouted, but this time there was an edge of fear that hadn't been there before. You're in over your head. You don't know who you're messing with. There are consequences. Consequences? I shot back, my voice rising above the cacophony. What's the consequence of ignoring every warning sign in front of you? What's the consequence of turning this into a circus instead of providing proper patient care? Somewhere in that moment, my heart ached with something that almost felt like pity. Pity for the man who had lost sight of what mattered. But then I remembered Mrs. Cohen, frail and trembling under that thin blanket, and I steeled myself again. Forgiving him would mean allowing the tragic farce to continue, compromising every ounce of empathy I dedicated to my patients. I couldn't betray them, not now. I refuse to let you manipulate me into silence, I declared, a fire blazing within. And it's not only my career here that's at stake, it's the safety of every patient who walks through these doors. The honesty of my words struck a chord as glances of solidarity coursed through the room. Amy nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears of relief and something else. Belonging, maybe. And suddenly, the realization washed over me that this battle wasn't one I would fight alone. I stand with her, Amy finally said, a voice that rang out strong and unwavering amidst the fray. We're not going to let you intimidate us into silence. We're here to fight for what's right. And then, in a heartbeat, others began to chime in, the ripple cascading through our colleagues. Me too, one called, and soon the room was a chorus of unity, each declaration pushing back against the oncoming storm. You think this is a game? Dr. Harris hissed, his expression shifting rapidly from anger to fear as the tide turned against him. You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it. But it was too late. The truth was out, and it was bleak, fierce, and unwavering. As I glanced at my colleagues, their eyes filled with support and conviction, I knew my decision was irrevocable. This was it. The final thread in our dedication had been pulled, and the fabric of our lives intertwined in a way I had never expected. You may think you can silence us, I said, locking eyes with Dr. Harris, fear dissolving into resolve. But no matter what you do next, you'll always be known as the one who couldn't stand for the truth when it mattered most. This is not about just you anymore. And in that moment, a silence enveloped us, a heavy, weighted silence that swallowed us whole. One that spoke louder than 1,000 accusations ever could. It resonated with such power that it felt like a gavel crashing down, sealing our pact in that sterile room. We were standing on the threshold, a new beginning waiting in the fragile light, while shadows from the past faded behind us. Mrs. Cohen, her hand still clutching mine, deserved to be at the center of our fight. We were no longer just nurses and doctors. We were keepers of our patients' stories, standing tall against the storm. And often, when faced with the hardest truths, the only answer that truly mattered was to fight fiercely for the light, because the world deserved nothing less. The weeks that followed that chaotic night blurred together under a haze of morning light and fluorescent overheads. I found myself back at the same hospital, but everything felt different. The tension in the air had shifted. It felt lighter somehow, reshaped by resolve and purpose. I spent the weeks after the confrontation with Dr. Harris immersed in renewed energy. The whispers of change were palpable across the ward, like the soft flutter of wings promising something new on the horizon. My colleagues rallied together, their backs straightened with the weight of our collective commitment to vindication. After all, we weren't just co-workers. We were a family forged through shared experience. Time moved on, and slowly but surely, we redefined our purpose within these walls. The board had taken notice after we reported in. Policies shifted, the whispers of accountability echoing louder than they ever had. I found myself speaking in meetings often. The young nurse who had once faltered beneath the weight of judgment now stood confidently, advocating for patient-centered care, often backed by the very staff who had once stood on the sidelines. We created new protocols, installed mentors, and made room for the voices of the younger nurses. As the months began to unspool, I realized that I had become something I never expected to be: a leader. I was no longer the ghost drifting through my shifts. Instead, I was a vibrant thread woven into the fabric of our unit, guiding the newer nurses, just as Amy had guided me. Mrs. Cohen's recovery still echoed in my heart, a reminder of why we fought so hard. Once hesitant about my choices, I had stepped into my power and wasn't turning back. On a bright Tuesday, I walked into the break room to find a framed certificate pinned to the bulletin board within a comb. My breath hitched as I recognized Amy's distinctive script. "Congratulations, Sarah. Patient Care Award 2024. You led the charge this year. Let's keep this rolling." The recognition felt surreal, a testament to change that began with that stormy night. It wasn't just my name on that paper. It was the culmination of everyone's dedication, their voices rising in solidarity. In that moment, the irony settled in. The chaotic turmoil birthed a new sense of purpose. A realization that even in the dark corners of the night, light could be found if you just dared to shine. I was still Sarah Mitchell, a nurse on the night shift, but I was no longer a ghost. I was alive in every sense, fighting not just for my patients, but for my colleagues, crafting a new path where compassion and accountability intertwined. The urgency that once gripped my pulse now surged with empowerment as I stood ready for whatever came next, confident, unwavering, and fiercely dedicated to the lives entrusted to my care. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues across the bustling city, I found myself in the break room again, staring at the recognition hanging on the wall. The Patient Care Award was a symbol of everything we had fought for, a testament to the shift in our unit's culture. But it was only the beginning. Change was electric in the air, and I felt proud to have been a part of it. That night, I and my colleagues gathered for a meeting that felt different from our usual routine. We had come together not just to discuss the chaos of the past, but to cultivate a brighter future. The mood was light, laughter mingling with the familiar sounds of clattering dishes and the hum of fluorescent lights, a far cry from the tense atmosphere that once engulfed us. "We did it, team," I said, my voice. Amy stood beside me, and her presence offered a sense of reassurance that drifted through the air like a comforting blanket. "Let's not forget Mrs. Cohen," she said, her voice steady. She was the catalyst for it all. Her story is why we advocate, why we strive to do more. The mention of Mrs. Cohen sent a wave of emotions through the group, and I could see familiar faces soften with recognition of the nights spent in the trenches. Working towards something bigger than ourselves, we moved on to discuss new protocols, improvement initiatives, and deeper bonds. The sense of solidarity we had built felt like the backbone of this new chapter. Each voice contributed courage as we laid the groundwork for what we wanted our unit to become, a place where patient-centered care wasn't just a phrase, but a lifestyle. Weeks flew by like the blink of an eye, and the memories of those tumultuous moments faded gradually into reminders of our resilience. We had gained new staff members, fresh faces eager to join our ranks and passionate about making a difference. The energy was infectious, a ripple effect igniting a shared mission. One evening, as our shift wound down, I caught a glimpse of the city lights twinkling through the windows. I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. I realized that our fight wasn't over, but it had become so much more than battling for recognition. It was about nurturing the spirit of those who felt lost, providing lives with care, dignity, and a sense of belonging. As I prepared to clock out, I bumped into Mrs. Cohen's son in the waiting area. He looked stronger, a far cry from the frantic man I had once faced. "Sarah," he called, and I turned, a smile breaking over my face. "Mr. Cohen, how's your mom?" "She's thriving. She says thanks to you and the team for never giving up." His eyes sparkled with sincerity, reflecting the community we had fostered. For once, I didn't feel like a ghost just lingering around my job. I felt vibrant and alive, capable of anything necessary to care for those who needed help the most. It was a feeling that rooted deep in my chest, something I wanted to hold on to tightly. As I stepped out of the hospital that night, I inhaled the crisp air, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. But I urged myself to carry forward that essence we had all shared. A sense of closure settled over me, the stormy nights behind us, replaced with bright horizons and new beginnings. The journey was far from over. It had merely transformed into something beautiful, a collective mission for compassion and care. So here's where I leave you, dear friends. If you've enjoyed this story, watched our journey unfold, and felt the emotions rise like the sun over the city, then you know it's not just about me. It's about all of us learning to stand tall together. So remember to subscribe immediately so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that await. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm, helping us spread the word. Flood the comments section below with your reactions and theories about how our world has changed. And don't forget to instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to know this conclusion. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's keep the energy alive.